Gavin Newsom bought a $9.1 million home, and that is absolutely expensive, obviously. But considering he only makes about $200,000 or $300,000 a year as a governor,
I really don't think the mansion purchase, in my opinion, is really where the focus should be. It should be in all those other areas where there has been a lack of transparency.
Do you think there's many people that think that the part of the 24 billion that is not tracked went that he pocketed it in any way?
Well, so the real thing that was tracked, and here I'm going to pull up. I'll put this in the chat if someone can pull it up.
Yeah.
The real thing was, it's not like the money itself disappeared out of thin air. What the frustration from the auditors was that it's not being tracked if it's working through any sort of metrics. Right now, as Americans, we got to realize that the past two presidents have racked up a ton of debt. And 100%. I think as Americans, we do need to all like push that issue a little bit more. I think it's across the board, really.
That's where Elon comes in.
Dodge, right, Nick? What's Dodge about?
And it is 20 million.
20 million.
Yeah.
Nick, tell us what Dodge is.
Doge.
Doge, whatever.
3 balls, 2 strikes, pressure is on. This is where we discuss real estate, property improvement, and business. Together, we'll strategize on how to win. Welcome to the Full Count.
Welcome to Full Count. Today, we're going to be discussing what's going on with Gavin Newsom's latest crazy purchase. A significant event happened in November. We're going to be going into a little bit of details about that. And we are welcoming back Nick. A lot of people have been asking us if he was deceased. After a couple Google searches, I could not find an obituary, and we did track him down, so he's back with us. So we're glad to have him. And then Andrews and his amazing internet connection are going to take us through the next segment.
Gone. How's it feel to be back on with the team, man?
Good. Missed you all. That's for sure. Yeah, good to be back.
High expectations for Nick now, so let's go.
Pressure's on. Full count.
Since you've been gone, Andrew has now become a fan of, I think we're at 6 teams now for the MLB. Are we there yet?
I still yet have to have the MLB hat that I was promised, but So guys, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Gavin Newsom bought a $9.1 million home. And that is absolutely expensive, obviously. But considering he only makes about $200,000 or $300,000 a year as a governor, right? But at the same time, he's an heir of family of multi-million dollars with wineries and other things as well. So it kind of makes sense. But I think it's just a matter of the fact that it's just like, more of an issue with him just because he's been a terrible governor, in my opinion. A lot of people know it. And then he's yet out there still buying all these expensive things, lavish things. So this is like a 5,600 square foot home. I'll pull it up here. I'll share the screen. A little bit about the article.
Do you know the reason for his purchase, Andrew?
No, he just wants to live in a better house.
No, okay. It's just upgrading.
Okay, it won't let me share it.
So I think it is important to point out that so he's going to retain his $3.7 million Sacramento residence. This is in Marin County, which is really close to San Francisco on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. So, and since he's the election in 2026 for California governor, he's not going to be eligible for. It seems like this is, him splitting his time between the two residences in anticipation that he's going to be vacating the office. And who would want to live in Sacramento unless they had to?
Why would he buy now, you think? Like, why wouldn't he wait until he leaves being governor? What's your thoughts?
You pointed out to me that right now may be a good time to buy because the interest rates are pretty high and you can refinance in a year, depending on your agreement. And so it might be a good idea to buy now. And then when the market shifts, when the interest rates finally do go down, then you can come out on top. Plus, he probably has a lot of money to play with in regards to this, I don't know how worried he is about pricing.
I mean, Andrew, what do you think about him just kind of throwing some money at this as an, investment perspective, just to have something holding, real estate rather than keeping it in something else? Do you think that could be a cause for the purchase?
I think the median price in Marion County is like 1.76, and I think
Right.
prices have already gone up about 7% in the last year, is from what I read. And it's
Mhm.
most likely home prices are going to continue going up. I don't see home prices not going up, and if they do, it'll have a dip, but it probably won't be like it'll be the super low single digit numbers. So I
Right.
think it's smart of him to do it, right? As
Yeah.
Chris pointed out, I had said that it's probably a good idea to do it considering mortgage rates may fall. I think they will probably next year sometime. I don't know by how much, but I think they might by a bit, and
Mhm.
less competition. So whoever's his real estate professional, Gavin's real estate professional. He knows what he's talking about, and Gavin's listening. But it just is not necessarily something people wanted to see online that he's has two homes now. Considering,
Yeah.
Chris, if you want to talk about how great Gavin has been as a governor, that'd be great. If you can swing that up.
Yeah, and so like I mentioned, he is on his last term in office. In 2 years,
Mhm.
less than 2 years, there's going to be an election that decides who takes over from here in California. There was a recall that happened, and obviously we know what the results of that were. I think if they would have went with a more moderate candidate to go against him, we would probably see a different result. But um, there's a lot of folks who aren't satisfied with the legacy of the California governor in regards to transparency. He's made a lot of promises. His entire tenure, he's pledged that he is going to tackle the homeless problem. Back
Mhm.
in May, April, there were reports from the California Auditing Agency
Mhm.
that they couldn't track $24 billion. And really, what they couldn't track is the effectiveness of the money. They couldn't track specifically, this is how much we spent on this, and then this is how effective it's been. And so a lot of folks might point to, hey, there's $24 billion. You guys haven't been on a track. You're over here buying another multi-million-dollar mansion. Um, the homeless problem is just getting worse and worse. Um, I don't know if those two things are necessarily related. He did enter into, he did come into the governor's office with millions and millions of dollars.
Mhm.
From what I could pull up, although it's very difficult to really know what someone's worth if they don't want you to know about it, it looks like he's at least doubled from 20 to 40 million net worth since he's
Wow.
been in office, making $200,000 a year as a governor. But most of his money comes from real estate and his business investments. I think he's pulling in about five million a year right now from his businesses that continue to operate. Some of them have been turned over to other people in his family, namely his winery has gone over to his sister. That was a big um, topic for corruption when it was discovered. What was the Silicon Valley Bank that got bailed out?
SVB, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
Silicon Valley
Yeah.
Bank.
SVB.
Yeah.
He went to the White House and advocated for a bailout for them. And there were a lot of folks, from regular independent journalists all the way to like the local NBC affiliates who are
Mm.
pointing out to the fact that it's illegal for you in California to use your office to advocate for something that you'll personally receive some sort of financial kickback in. And his argument to that was, hey, I'm not running my business any longer. But that business in particular that would have been affected was his vineyard that was owned by his sister. So obviously, that's kind of a silly argument that would only really work if there wasn't an actual means to hold him accountable. I mean, obviously, that wouldn't fly in a jury for most people. So a lot of people
Yeah.
can point to this waste and lack of transparency, and they can feel a little bitter about someone spending millions of dollars on a mansion, which is understandable. But I really don't think the mansion purchase, in my opinion, is really where the focus should be. It should be in all those other areas where there has been a lack of transparency. And the question is, will Californians vote a different direction in the upcoming election in 2026? Or will they continue to accept this sort of lack of transparency, lack of results that they're seeing right now, and just hope for the best?
Mhm. Do you think there's many people that think that the part of the 24 billion that is not tracked went that he pocketed it in any way?
Well, so the real thing that was tracked, and here I'm gonna pull up. I'll put this in the chat if someone can pull it up.
Yeah.
The real thing was, it's not like the money itself disappeared out of thin air. What the
Right.
frustration from the auditors was that it's not being tracked if it's working through any sort of metrics, and who knows, maybe it actually is being tracked, but they didn't want to turn over that information because it's definitely not working, right? But
Right.
they wanted to use this as a means to motivate towards a bill of some sort, where there's could be some kind of legislation that forces these officials to track it a certain way. But again, if you're just somebody that lives in California, you pretty much know it's not working just by walking down the street. So where's the money going? Who really knows at the end of the day?
Right. I'm trying to pull it up.
And I just
Yeah.
and I wanted to point out something else too, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of a microcosm of this problem, which is he's campaigned on being the first California governor to release his tax returns. Obviously, that's a big thing with the 45th and now 47th president of the United States that everybody's called for. But since his second term, he hasn't released a tax return, which is just a microcosm of that same sort of transparency I think that California voters may be disappointed about. What do you think, Andrew? Do you think homelessness has improved in the past 4 years?
Absolutely not. I think in 2008 we saw Newsom saying, I mean, it's on TV or video or whatever, that he's going to bring down homelessness. He's going to solve homelessness. Obviously, he didn't, and it's much worse under his leadership. And everything you had said before about his businesses and his sister and SVB sounds like a complete schemer to me. But at the same time, I think people are forgiving in a way. Like if he did all that, but he was running the ship well in California, I think people would be like, typical politician, at least my streets are clean. There's no homelessness necessarily, and it's pretty safe. But the guy is like making every wrong move, and that's what compounds and makes people upset. So the fact that under his belt also 24 billion, among all his other people that are running, it's not just him, obviously, but the people are not being held accountable. And obviously, I think this is probably being pocketed, not necessarily by Newsom, but by a lot of administrators that are friends with his and mutual friends, and on and on and on.
Yeah, and Nick's question, I think, was related to, do we think that, hey, look, some of those tens of billions of dollars directly may have ended up in his pocket that could have helped him pay for the mansion? And I don't think there's any evidence of that. I think we would hear about that, but of course, any of these elected officials, when you think of Nancy Pelosi, there's always that possibility for indirect benefit. Just the power you wield in that office could help you for years to come when you get out,
Oh, for sure.
Especially since it was supposed to go towards decreasing homelessness, where according to this, it grew by 6% just last year. And since 2015,
it's been consistently
crazy.
Yeah, it's been consistently like those sort of percentages year over year. And you can make the argument, and I'm sure some of this is true, that he's made it an ideal place, so many people are flocking there. But I mean, that's also a failure. Is anytime you're increasing it, because the arguments are large amounts of homelessness. Obviously, there's a humanity aspect to it, but then there's the aspect of it brings crime to cities, and so it's not good to be the most welcoming. It's a fine line you got to play, and it just seems like there hasn't been any playing of any fine lines. It's been this big money ball, this money pit.
Have we heard about Kamala? Have you seen that? I think it was $2 million in debt from the campaign. And the reason why I bring that up, I think it's 2 million if I'm not mistaken, right? Approximately.
Yeah, I think that's kind of accurate from what I read. It was a couple million. I thought I heard 20 million out of like 1.5 billion, around roughly that for total. But I thought I saw
either way,
20
that
million.
debt that she has, it just shows that because the reason why I bring her up is I hear that she might be running for governor in 2028. I think it was, maybe not 2026, but 2028. The reason why I bring it up is these particular individuals are not doing well. They're not. They don't know how to like, have a checkbook. They're obviously
Yeah.
doing a really bad job with finances, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, it seems like in California, people still let them do their thing. So it's just really bad altogether. Kamala was almost going to run the country. The fact that she, on her campaign, she was in debt alone, that's pretty bad. So let's talk about the election results. Trump
Andrew
winning
Wait,
the
Steve.
office.
before we move on, let me just say this. I think that right now, as Americans, we got to realize that the past two presidents have racked up a ton of debt, and I think as
100%.
Americans, we do need to all like push that issue a little bit more. I don't. I
Yeah.
think it's across the board, really.
That's where Elon comes in.
Yeah,
Dodge, right? Nick, what's Dodge
Yeah.
about?
and it is
What's
20
Dodge?
million.
20 million.
Yeah.
Nick, tell us what Dodge is.
Doge.
Doge, whatever.
I mean, isn't that so? I haven't looked up much on it, to be completely honest.
Department of
But
Government
that's his
Efficiency.
department. Yeah, that's his Elon's new department.
Yeah. So he's going to come in, clean house, hopefully make everything more efficient. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy. I think that'll help with inflationary pressure to go down.
100%.
But at the same time, it's going to bring unemployment up because a lot of these jobs that Biden had brought in with his administration were government jobs. So that if they start cutting all these jobs, the unemployment rate is going to go up, which will affect the economy. The other thing that I do notice, like going back to Chris's point, both administrations and all the other administrations, for the most part, I think except like Bill Clinton, added debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's true.
under Trump, he wants to do the tariffs, and it's more of a negotiation bargaining chip, I think. So it's not necessarily that he's going to put all these tariffs on everybody to such a high degree, but that will add inflation, and then tax cuts will provide a deficit, which is not good for mortgage rates. So that's one of the concerns. But considering his team and he's more business prone, I don't think it's going to be as bad as everybody thinks for mortgage rates for next year and the following years. Is my understanding.
Yeah. But I mean, he plans on cutting a lot of taxes, but then he plans on cutting even more government spending, right? And that goes just full circle back to Elon. So
yeah, right.
So in turn, and also investing a lot in cryptocurrency. And I know we haven't really talked much about crypto, but with more investment there, the wealth of that goes up, the country gets richer, and it goes full circle.
Crypto community is so happy with him because they definitely helped him win, I think, to some degree. Which is interesting.
Those back channels.
Yeah. One aspect of these tariffs that just kind of worked out in his favor, I think, was just to bring it up, was in Mexico. He said he was going to throw a 25% tariff, I think, and he ended up negotiating already before he's in office with the Mexican president lady, who basically is, well, there's no real decision yet, but you can tell that they're both bluffing a little bit. But the fact that he brought her to the table to kind of stop the illegal immigration, might be a good thing considering we've had an issue with Biden and Kamala. So
right.
That's another negotiation tactic.
Yeah, no, it really is. But I mean, all of that's great. But I mean, what I'm most excited about is RFK for sure. And
tell us why.
Maha. Make America healthy again. No, I mean, like I said, I'm most excited about RFK and what he's going to do. Because we needed the food industry in this country, the pharmaceutical industry in this country is complete garbage, and it's making everybody sick. It's poisoning everybody. I mean, product of that, and at the moment, so could definitely go off on that for quite some time. But I mean, the amount of just additives and ingredients and pesticides and toxins that we're exposed to as Americans, any majority of the other countries in the world aren't exposed to, right? From things that are like glyphosate that are put on our crops and food, or things that are, animals like beef. Even if you get grass-fed, pasture-raised beef, if it's not from a good source, it could still definitely be, exposed to all these different antibiotics and toxins that you're exposed to. And then everything in the water, right? But I mean, even at the simplest form, if you look at a product that, say, I don't know, Kellogg's produces, right? And you compare it to that same product over in Europe or in Asia, it has half the ingredients and maybe even quarter of the ingredients that are in there, right? So it's it's kind of crazy on all the research that's coming out now on how all of these things are affecting not only like our generation, but the generation after us and before us, right? That we were kind of
Right.
inherited, which they didn't know at that time, right? So we can't necessarily blame them. But you know, the bigger corporations definitely knew that. The pharmaceutical companies knew the things that they were doing and putting in the food, putting in the water, that are leading to so many different autoimmune issues, ADHD, mental type of issues, right?
Inflammation.
Issues, chronic inflammation, which is, I
Yeah.
mean, the underlying cause of all disease, right? I
It's
mean, if you
crazy,
just look
dude.
at the word, yeah, if you look at the word dis-ease, it's dis-ease, right? Out of basically homeostasis, and all these things are endocrine disruptors that put us out of homeostasis. So I'm
Right.
just really excited on RFK coming in and cleaning house and actually giving it to these big, you know, corporations that have kind of worked to brainwash us for profit, really. I mean, and you look at all the commercials and things that they pushed back, you know, when our parents were growing up, or even when we were younger. You know, it's like, oh, this is
Tobacco,
good for you.
sugar.
Eat this and eat that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saturated fats, is it? I think they said it was good for you at the time. Or what type of fat? Do you remember?
Well,
And
actually, they used to just be anti all fat. As
anti-fat. Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. Exactly.
mm.
Whereas now, I mean, you want to cure yourself, go on a carnivore-based diet, you know? And I mean, there's obviously nuances there,
Yeah, of
and you got to
course.
take it by case
Yeah,
basis.
you're not an
But
expert in that.
in
Neither am
general,
I. Right.
yeah. But I mean, in general, you know, you want to clear up a lot of issues. That's definitely a good place to start. So yeah, I mean, I just really hope that RFK comes in and does what he's saying he's going to, which I think he is going to, because he went against. I mean, his
Track
whole
record.
family's been Democrat, yeah, and
Right.
he went against that and is now a Republican, you know, uh, spokesperson and candidate
Well,
and holding an
he was
office.
an attorney that beat lawsuit against that gardening chemical. I forgot the name, and he won for his client. I think it was. It starts
Yeah,
with
the
an M.
glyphosate. Yep,
Okay,
they're spraying
but it's
glyphosate on the crops.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, hopefully, you know, he could get in, and you know, Trump already said he's gonna let him do what he wants to do. So hopefully that's still the case once January rolls around, and maybe within the next, you know, 6 to 9 months, we could start to see a difference in the quality of our food, or at least, you know, policies and implemented changes that'll start to roll out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that right after the election, the first thing that I was excited about is the same thing that Nick just touched on. One of my first thoughts was how excited I was with what's going to happen with the food in America. Everybody
Hmm.
always talks about how much healthier food is in Europe, and obviously, when you go somewhere like Italy, the food just, even though it could be high in carbs, it still just makes you feel good when you eat it. You don't
Yeah.
feel like it's a chore.
Heavy.
Like,
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I had McDonald's, but I do know that after I ate it, I felt like what was going on inside of me was bad. Like, it just didn't feel good. It felt like
Yeah.
I needed to take a nap immediately. It wasn't promoting anything in my body other than, wow, that really tasted good. And
Yeah.
so American food has prioritized taste, bright colors in produce, high sugary foods. Whenever I went keto the first time, I think it was like 2019, I realized that there was like one last piece of sugar that I was kind of hanging on to in my diet, and it was an apple. And I
Hmm.
remember I was driving home from work and I had this thought in my mind. I was like, man, I can't wait till I get home and get that apple. And then I realized I was an addict. Like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm addicted to sugar. That is like
Yes.
something someone would say about like a
Cocaine.
heroin
Yeah.
situation, you know? I can't wait to get that hit, you know? And I was so excited about getting that, you know? And if you think about that, an apple is something that we view as Americans as like one of the most healthy things you can eat. And here I was fiending for one. And I had cut out all the other stuff. I had cut out ingredients I couldn't pronounce. Um, and that's a pretty large list that you'll find in the grocery store. And I'd cut out so many things. And then there was that last thing that I was kind of holding on to. So that is what my initial reaction to the election. was, I'm
Right.
actually, excited about the food.
Mhm.
That to me,
Yeah.
and I also think that it's the thing that can actually be affected the easiest.
Right.
Right.
While the idea of Elon and Vivek going through and doing like an office space on the government, it sounds
The
cool in
stretch.
theory, but national defense, Social Security, VA benefits, um, Medicare, these are things that are going to be very difficult to even touch. And most people probably don't want a lot of that to be touched, especially when you
Right.
talk about this Ponzi scheme that we call Social Security. Um, but what are they really going to be able to affect? What are they really going to be able to touch? What percentage is that? I've heard that it's really low what they're really going to be able to get in there and do. And but I am interested to find out what that is, and I will say at least I do trust Elon to be very pragmatic about it. I do think that RFK and Elon, the entire time that they're doing these things, they're going to be getting beaten up by the media.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's something that they're gonna have to, if they're gonna be successful, they're gonna have to tune
And
a
by
lot of it
DC,
out.
of course.
Yeah, and you think I
Mhm.
was just in DC 2 weeks ago, and I was walking around, looking at all these buildings, looking at these industries, and like none of these people are happy that Elon is in town.
Yeah.
That's their job security, so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
But as a nation, maybe it's time we need an audit.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Rand Paul had said it best, or Ron Paul, that once government passes something with spending, right, it's like impossible to get rid of it. There's no
Hmm.
way you can get rid of it.
Mhm.
So I totally understand where you're coming from. But at the same time, if they do a good job clearing house and getting the right people to get out, maybe, just maybe, they might be able to retract things. But I don't think it's going to be in the next 4 years they're going to be able to do what everyone's hoping. It's going to take some time. But with the health situation, hopefully that does kick through, like you were saying, Chris and Nick. But do you think, Nick, or with all this stuff that we've already consumed in our bodies, are we already kind of damaged goods, or can we actually heal? What,
You
I know
no
you're not a
body
doctor,
has
but like
been.
you're pretty well read into this.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys know I'm going through a health journey
Right.
right now
That's
myself, right?
right.
But the body does have an amazing healing capability, right? I mean, that's how we've become such a great, an abundant species, right? So no, all hope is not lost. But if things don't change soon, I mean, this is affecting, kids that our generation who are having kids, generation before us and after us that are having kids, right? Where all of these type of autoimmune and mental issues like ADHD
Right.
and things like that, right, are becoming more and more I guess abundant, right, in kids in very young ages, like 2, 3, 4, 7 years old, right? And having to detox your kids in order for them to
Yeah.
start to actually mature as they should, right? And start to develop as they should. I mean, if you look at, for one example, if you look at like younger girls, right? They're getting their period, I mean, at very, very young ages because of all the antibiotics that are in the meat and the water. Um, so, yeah, I mean, all hope is not lost. And I was
You
actually just
sound
having
like
this
the
conversation.
guy that says the water's turning the frogs gay when you said that.
The what?
Alex Jones.
That's what you sounded like right
The interesting thing about that one was he was a little bit validated on that one,
now. I know it was
but the
true.
way he said it came off a little weird. But there was like solid research that what he was saying was right, and along the lines of what Nick is saying, because
Mhm.
there's a lot of medication that makes it into our water supply, and it
Yes.
messes up your hormones, which
Yes.
is what makes you feel good and like feel
Mhm.
normal. And then if you look at the percentage of folks that are on ADHD medication and all these other, this whole industry. But what I find interesting is these discussions that we're having about RFK, even Elon, and some of these other discussions where we're talking about this fight against, what we're really talking about is this fight against crony capitalism. And
Mhm.
if you look at a lot of these arguments, they're very reminiscent of Bush era Democrat talking points.
Yeah.
Um, and what's very interesting is the Democrat establishment is terrified that these might come into play. And I find that the most unique thing, if you look at his cabinet, is how many of them 4 years ago, including him, by the way. Well, him, it's more like 15 years ago, 16 years ago, but are actually like former Democrats. And it kind of
Yeah.
makes you wonder what just happened, because it's not really as black and white as it's been portrayed. There's
No.
definitely
And I
been a
mean,
change that's occurred.
yeah, political ideologies have definitely shifted. And I mean, more so over the past couple of years than probably ever before. But definitely since, like you said, since Trump was more democratic, 15, 16 years ago, 100%.
And that was the concern by a lot of Republicans whenever he was running, was like, hey, this is actually a Democrat running.
Yeah.
That was kind of the comment they made about him. And obviously, it's really hard to say, because you look at, like, for example, the border was like a bipartisan issue for like a very long time.
Yeah.
And then until he said that, then it became like black and white. You either want an open border or you don't.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was weird how that all played out, but I think it's hard to rectify as an American, because you're like, wait a minute, how did this all just change? How did these perspectives change overnight? I feel like that has happened in the past 10 years. So many perspectives, you've been kind of pushed into a camp, and
Right.
accepted.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Angela, tell you, I'm right, right there, right?
I think a lot of what might have changed your opinion, Nick, was RFK, and I think a lot of people changed on.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just RFK though. I mean, between the two choices, and if you look at what's happened over the past 4 years. I mean, I've had a couple of conversations with my girlfriend about this, and because she's also perspective.
Nice. Sorry, go on.
No, you're good. But yeah, I mean, we had a number of conversations where we both were more on the Democratic side of things, and then now, just because of how everything has happened over the past 4 years, that it just kind of makes more sense, because of how drastically everything has changed and party lines have changed.
Right. And I think that's why things are more balanced ideology wise in America than most of us thought, I think.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Not on a federal level.
That?
On a federal level, as of November 5th, they are not more balanced. I mean, I think that it's, if you look at what's the saving grace for Democrats? I really feel like this is an opportunity that unfortunately won't be taken advantage of. It would do America a lot of good right now if there was this introspective view. But unfortunately, I've been watching like a lot of street interviews across the country on YouTube of the aftermath, talking to people that voted one way or the other. And I don't, it's so black, people, there's two different ways of thinking in this country, and it really causes me pause, because I'm like, what if I'm wrong about everything? Because they are clearly wrong about everything, I
think you're right though, because
I'm like, so maybe I'm completely wrong here. So I check myself, and I'm like, but then I think the thing that really gets me is when someone tells me something that's like blatantly not true, and I think to myself, like, oh, you just haven't looked into it, like you've literally just listened to one of these major news networks and said, this is how it is, and then you haven't dug any deeper and really thought about it, and so it's difficult out here. I remember I was having a conversation with someone close to me and my family a month ago, and I'm very careful to make sure that I'm using, I really want to make sure that I'm not saying anything that's not true. And there was the whole discussion. It was a political football of was the borders are, was she not? And so I was very careful to say exactly what the Biden executive order was, which was to look at the root causes. When I was talking to someone in my family who's clearly 100% all in Democrat, and I was talking to them, and I said, whenever she was tasked with solving the root cause issues on the border, and I was and I pointed out how there didn't seem like there was a lot of effort there, and they corrected me, and they were like, no. It's this such a lie that keeps being said that she's the border czar. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm just talking about the Biden executive order where he does spell out she is tasked with solving the root cause crisis of migration in the country. That's an objective fact. And so at that moment, I realized in that conversation that I care about my family member a lot. And I'm not even going to counter with, hey, that's the executive order that he signed. I'm not even going to do any of that. I'm now going to concede the conversation and allow them to continue this world that they want to live in. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
There was to add to that point. I think one of the reasons why they also lost too was Brian Williams. I think NBC retired anchor. He was saying some talk show or something after the election that they continued to want to move the goalposts of culture, like the shift of culture. Like the focus and emphasis was culture only, which is good in a way, like culture, to focus on culture. But when it came to like inflation, crime, the border, they were like basically saying, no, that doesn't exist. Stop talking about it. Everything's fine. Focus on this over here. But since 2021, I think the Commerce Department had mentioned that inflation's up about 30%, either 20 or 30% since 2021. But that percentage does not reflect into CPI the way it should be. It like CPI should be a lot higher. And people that are, whether they're Democrat or Republican, they're like, I need to focus on getting groceries. I don't care about what you're saying about this with culture or whatever. I want to focus on being able to feed my family. And that's why that landslide happened, like Chris had said. Even though I think everyone's more balanced, but we clearly saw everyone vote for Trump, a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you can learn a lot by watching. I think I've watched every media network, like a timeline, a supercut of their reaction to election night as it progressed. CBS to me was the most telling because you realized you were watching, like on CBS was more prominent than any other network, in my opinion. Well, I guess MSNBC, if you're not counting them, but CBS was just, you can tell that they were advocating and for a result. And then as it went on, they were trying to explain, oh my God, this disastrous thing just happened in the country. Like, and it was just very clear, like, okay, you guys aren't even hiding the fact that you wanted a certain side to win. It's not even like a question anymore. And I think that has blinded a lot of the coverage. And if the coverage is blinded, that means like people watching it, they're going to see that. They're going to notice that there's someone cheerleading and they're going to be turned off from that. And I think the worst thing is when I think no American on the left or the right is turned on by finger wagging. And that happened. This happened a lot leading up to the election. This finger wagging and that arrogance in the air, very similar to 2016, like really similar to that same vibe where you're being lectured to. I think that again, there's not going to probably be a lot of soul searching, but I think everybody could soul search at this moment in time. In fact, Republicans should soul search right now and really push for some of these things that they wanted to happen. Don't just, be happy that your team won. And like, now's the time to really be holding your elected leaders to account. And like, just don't now be quiet about it and just, haha, my team won. That's a really silly way to be governed, is that way.
Yeah. But I think you made a good point, Andrew. I mean, you're definitely right, Chris, 100%, that they were just kind of showing that they picked a side and that was it. But you made a good point, Andrew, where I think Americans are just tired of the price of everything and just, going into debt and not being able to afford things that they should be able to afford.
Talk about credit card debt.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I know we wanted to touch on was the increase in credit card debt, right? Which was, let me pull that up. It had increased now to hit a record high of $1.17 trillion, which is crazy.
It was 900 billion in 2020, I believe.
Yes, exactly.
About.
Right. So, I mean, that's a substantial increase. And I mean, I really think that's, I mean, I don't think, I mean, everybody would agree that that's because of inflation and people not being able to afford what they used to be able to afford to live the quality of life that they want to live, right? Or should be able to live, or were living before, right? Because wages have not followed that.
And this reflects in life. I think I saw on Wealth Instagram, 1 of 4 individuals will be single for the rest of their life, which sucks, right?
Yeah.
Because now it gives them the less chance or probability of being successful to some degree. That's subjective and financially. The median age of a home buyer now is for a first time home buyer is 38. I remember when it used to be like 28 or 33. Now it's 38. You're almost 40 as a first time home buyer.
Yeah.
A repeat buyer is 61 years old. An average home buyer, when you average it all out, it's 56. That's not obviously good, and it's probably going to keep going down that route. Yeah, it's insane. And I think, unfortunately, in a way, home prices will probably still continue to go up, at least even very minimal, but still it's expensive. And that's a big issue that is just going to continue to be rampant more than likely, unless, Dodge and all that, or Doge, whatever you said, Chris, ends up working out better and they bring the rates down. But when rates come down, people want to buy. So who knows what's going to happen. I can't wait to talk about the cabinet position and what that might do. I know, Chris, you're going to love to talk about that. Trump's cabinet. So will you, Nick, especially with the health situation. So let's do that for the next podcast. And if everyone was entertained by this, like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We all appreciate you. Thank you.